All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we are unpacking a massive, centuries-old theological debate all about human nature, sin, and grace. Relying heavily on Dr. Robert A. Peterson's detailed textual and historical breakdown, we're going to explore exactly how different Christian traditions view humanity's absolute deepest flaws and, ultimately, its rescue.
To make sense of such a complex topic, here's our roadmap. We'll start with the two atoms, move into the imbalanced ledger, check out some early church perspectives, examine Pelagianism as a counterexample, and wrap up with Arminianism and Prevenient grace. Let's get to it.
So, kicking things off with Section 1, the two atoms, where we really anchor this textual debate.
To lay down the ground rules that all these historical figures were arguing over, Dr. Peterson builds this really vital comparison to illustrate the Apostle Paul's framework in Romans chapter 5. It's a stark juxtaposition. On one hand, you have Adam's single act of disobedience leading straight to a verdict of condemnation and the ultimate result of death. But on the flip side, Christ's single act of obedience leads to a verdict of justification and the result of eternal life.
And this textual parallel leads us directly into the core concept of original sin. Dr. Peterson notes that the entire mess, the tangle, and the sheer heinousness of human sin stems completely from that very first man. Original sin isn't just, the first bad thing that happened in history. It's the specific theological concept that Adam's singular rebellion actually wired the rest of humanity with a sinful nature.
Which brings us to Section 2, the imbalanced ledger, weighing condemnation against grace.
Now, things get really interesting here because we have two seemingly contradictory verses. Verse 18 uses the word all, but right after it, verse 19 uses the word many. Well, Dr. Peterson points out that Paul isn't just confused or contradicting himself in the space of two senses, not at all. He's using all and many to specifically represent each respective head, Adam and Christ, and the exact people who belong to them. It's an intentionally imbalanced ledger to demonstrate the catastrophic effect of one action versus the abundant, disproportionate grace of the other.
So the crucial point of this entire explainer really hinges on answering this exact question. How in the world does one ancient man's singular act transfer guilt or corruption all the way down to the rest of us? Is it some sort of physical inheritance, a spiritual legal ruling? What is the actual mechanism?
Let's look at Section 3, Early Church Perspectives, and trace the flow of theological history to find out.
To really answer that question, we have to step out of the strict biblical text and into the flow of historical theology to see how early thinkers actually wrestled with human capability. We start with the Genesis account, of course, then move to Paul's theology in Romans 5. But then things really heat up in the 400s AD with the fierce debates between Augustine and Pelagius. Those arguments shaped Western thought forever, stretching all the way to modern declarations like the 1975 Junaluska Affirmation.
Notice the fascinating historical contrast here. Relying on historian Gerald Bray, Dr. Peterson explains that the Eastern Church viewed sin primarily as a consequence of inherited mortality. Basically, we die, and because we are mortal and finite, we sin. But the Western view, which was championed heavily by Augustine, argued that sin was a deeply ingrained, active corruption of our original goodness. It wasn't just lacking something. It was a deeply rooted, active disease demanding God's direct, intervening rescue.
And that conflict sets up Section 4, Pelagianism, a bad example, and the denial of inherited sin.
This brings us to one of Augustine's absolute fiercest historical opponents, a 5th century British monk making quite a name for himself in Rome, named Pelagius. He operated on a concept called creationism. Now, in this context, that's the belief that every single baby's soul is a fresh, special creation of God at the exact moment of conception, totally untainted by Adam's past corruption or any inherited guilt. He basically looked at human nature and said, hey, we are all born with a totally clean slate. In this specific view, Adam didn't ruin our human nature at all. He was essentially just history's worst bad influence. According to Pelagius, everyone simply develops bad habits by unfortunately mimicking Adam. Therefore, he argued, humans possess complete, total free will, and salvation can theoretically be achieved through pure human effort, without any special internal intervention from God whatsoever.
So, when Pelagius talked about God's grace, he radically redefined it. To him, it just meant these three external tools: the law to guide us, the example of Jesus to inspire us, and our own innate human free will to make the right choice. Now, as you can imagine, the Western Church and the later Protestant reformers fiercely condemned this. Martin Luther literally used the term Pelagian as an insult against his opponents, arguing that this view completely destroys the true glory of Christ's unearned merit. Which brings us to our final historical framework in Section 5, Arminianism and prevenient grace, and the idea of restoring the bound will.
We are now looking at conservative Arminianism, which strongly rejects Pelagius's extreme optimism. As this official statement from the 1975 Junaluska affirmation shows, modern Arminians actually completely agree with the pessimistic Augustinian idea of total human corruption. They explicitly state that the corruption of sin is so pervasive, we are completely incapable of making a positive response to God's offer of redemption on our own. Total human inability.
But Arminianism solves this massive problem of human inability by introducing a really brilliant concept called prevenient grace. Prevenient literally means coming beforehand. According to this theology, God universally applies this preparing grace to all people. It's a divine intervention that specifically neutralizes the paralyzing effects of original sin in one key area of human nature, which then allows people to freely choose whether or not to believe.
The contrast here is super stark. On one side, the Pelagian human will is naturally free and pure from birth. But on the other, the Arminian human will acknowledges original sin's catastrophic damage. It completely agrees the will is inherently corrupt, yet argues it is artificially freed by this universal preparing grace. Dr. Peterson calls this a genius move of theology, because it acts as the crucial glue to restore humanity's free will while still maintaining that we are in desperate, absolute need of God's grace.
Ultimately, whether we are analyzing Paul's texts, Augustine's active corruption, Pelagius's clean slate, or Arminian prevenient grace, this explainer leaves us pondering a profound question. If we are truly and universally damaged by the first Adam, exactly how much of our salvation relies on sheer divine grace, and how much relies on our own restored will to accept the second Adam? It's a fundamental question that has shaped history, and it's one you have to answer for yourself. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, and we'll see you in the next explainer.